Good evening. Welcome to the regular Planning Commission meeting, Grand Blanc Township, January 3rd, 2019. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Planning Commission members present this evening. We have Mr. Mansour, Ms. Coulter, Mr. Saab, Mr. Brown, Mr. Yellings, Mr. Bandersky, Mr. Horsha, Mr. Yancho. We have our planner, Mr. Mark Lloyd, and our attorney, Mr. David Laddie. I think at this time we're going to allow Mr. Bennett to make an introduction.
Good evening. Thank you again for all of you serving on the Planning Commission. We know it's sometimes a thankless position, but we value the work that you do, certainly, because you are the planners for the future of Grand Blanc. And I know this next couple of years is going to be an exciting one with the master plan and our DDA just kicking off and lots of exciting things. So we have unfortunately, we have an opening on our Planning Commission that I was informed of in the past couple of weeks, and that's with Mr. Joe Johnson resigning because of other commitments and travel and things of that nature. But I was very fortunate to find somebody fairly quickly that I think will do a fabulous job, and I've been friends with this individual, business associates, for a while, and turns out that it's Joe's son. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jay Johnson. Comes to us with a number of credentials that I think will be beneficial to our township and our Planning Commission specifically. So I'll let Jay say a few words. And yeah.
Well, hello everybody. My name's Jay, and like he said, I'm Joe's son. My dad asked me a couple years ago if I'd ever be interested in, kind of helping out or doing anything with the Planning Commission. And initially my answer was no, I was busy. I have 4 boys, all under the age of 10, that run my wife and I ragged. So at the time, it was I think I'll take a pass. And then, last week, Scott reached out and said, hey, listen, we have this opportunity, and I just found out that Joe Johnson's your dad. He said, I wonder if you come fill his shoes, because he's done well for us. So ever since the conversation I had with my father, I had decided that if I was ever approached, I would accept the position, or at least the nomination, I should say, because it's important. My dad has helped throughout his time in Grand Blanc Township, same way that my grandparents did and my great-grandparents. I'm 5th generation Grand Blanc, and now I'm in a position where I feel I have something to offer and would like to do so. So I really appreciate the nomination, and I hope it works out.
So Mr. Bennett, you're anticipating that he will be named at the next township board meeting?
Yes, we're going to make the nomination next week, and we'll be voting on that on Thursday. Jay is very humble, but he brings with him a background that I think will help on transportation and planning of that nature. And that title is Vice President at
Yes.
Patriot Ambulance Company. And so they interact with municipalities throughout the county, and I think it'll be beneficial to us as we look at transportation patterns and what have you. But yeah, next week, also would like to see if we can't get his father, Joe, back to recognize him for his efforts. I believe he was just short of serving on the Planning Commission for 20 years. I think just short by a few weeks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so anyways, we want to task you with that, of getting him back here so that we can recognize his efforts to help this township.
Do my best to be pulling him off the ski slope, probably.
Okay, well, I might have to go up and recruit him. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Okay.
guys. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes, question?
Are you on the ski patrol?
I am not.
Oh, okay.
No, I am not.
So
Yeah.
Something to aspire to?
You know,
You don't like snow?
I do. I love snow. I ski. I've snowboarded for years. It's just the time thing. It's, you know, everybody needs my attention.
Okay.
So, yeah, I never really got into it. So,
Right.
which was interesting because of the whole ambulance work. You'd think that'd kind of go hand in hand, wouldn't you?
You hope not.
Well, right.
One other comment, if I can, one of the requirements will be to have you prepare a one page or less bio on yourself
Okay.
for this planning commission. And Maria will give you copies of ours,
Okay.
okay?
Perfect.
And I'll
Very good, thank you.
Mark, will you see that Maria? pulls
Absolutely.
those?
She does a good job. We'll
Thank
take care
you.
of all that.
That way we have a better understanding of everybody
Okay.
and what their backgrounds are.
Excellent. Yeah, I
Okay?
could definitely do
Thank
that.
you.
No problem.
Thanks. All right. Next item on our agenda would be approval of this evening's agenda. I'd like to add one more item under new business. I guess we'll call it Planning Commission assignments, perhaps. Under item 7. I don't know if anybody has any other amendments to the this evening's agenda. Not a motion to approve the agenda as amended would be appropriate. Motion by Mr. Saab, support by Mr. Yancho. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes 8-0. Next item would be approval of meeting minutes, but I don't believe these were distributed
No, they
No.
weren't.
from December 6, 2018, so I'd suggest that we push that back to the next
Right.
meeting. Anybody has any issues with that?
Yes, sir.
Next item would be an opportunity for public comment. I don't know if there's anyone in the audience tonight that would like to address the planning commission. This would be the time to do it. Doesn't look like it. We will close the public comment portion, bring it back up to the planning commission. Next item on our agenda is correspondence. We have the planning and zoning news from December.
Edition. More discussion about marijuana. They're gonna change the way they do it.
Any other
Change it to a J instead.
correspondence? All right, brings us to old business. Item 6A, master plan consultant selection.
Well,
Mr. Lloyd.
yes, sir, thank you. We did end up having a pretty exciting end of the year, which involved the review and interviewing of consultants for preparing the township's master plan. That group consisted of myself and Mr. Gellings and Mr. Mansour. We received five proposed bids, and we started this whole thing, if maybe you guys will remember, back in 2017, where there was a full review of the master plan performed, and then after the end of the year, shortly after I got on board, as a matter of fact, we had a joint meeting with the Township Board and the Planning Commission. At that time, we were all pretty excited about moving forward, and I think it was at that time that comment about being a quote-unquote premier community came to light, and that seems to have stuck. And me, as I've been thinking about things, I'm kind of liking the moniker here, or at least looking at the idea of calling our plan and working on this being a premier plan for a premier community. So hopefully we can give consideration to that, knock that around a little bit. But the thing we discovered is that we didn't have a budget back in 2018, so we really couldn't move forward on the selection in the master plan. So what we did was took a look at what it was going to take to prepare a master plan and put a budget proposal together of $40,000 for this next year. And that's been adopted, it's in place. We did that back in September. And then in October of last year, we prepared and distributed the RFP to solicit those bids and got 5 of them, as I mentioned, in November. We had McKenna, Beckett and Rader, Spicer, Rowe, Newmark, Knight, and Frank all selected. proposed. And then we selected the top 3 for interviews, and that was McKenna, Beckett and Rader, and Spicer. That was our determination after analyzing the actual hard copies of the proposals. And those were the 3 that we sat down and did face-to-face interviews with, and that was in December. And what we're moving on now is the committee has selected Beckett and Rader unanimously. We've all decided that that was the firm that we thought was the most qualified, if you will, across the board. There were some ups and downs, if you will, in scoring and looking at them, but overall, that's the firm that we thought could do the job the best. They had a lot of inside information and insights. I'm sorry, sir, what was your question?
Oh, just the question was where the folks from?
Oh, I'm sorry. Beckett and Rader is an Ann Arbor firm. They have a facility in Petoskey. One person show up there in Traverse City. And it seems like they had one sort of in between somewhere. There seemed to have been a fourth, and I'm sorry I don't recall that off the top of my head. But they're primarily operating out of Ann Arbor.
Thank you.
Yep. And so tonight, if you'll recall, the Planning Commission selected this committee to do the analysis and make a recommendation to you, and that's going to happen this evening. So what will happen if the commission makes a determination and a recommendation to the board is that we'll move the item onto the Township Board on the 10th of this month at their next meeting. And at that time, we would ask the board to authorize staff to enter into a contract. We would expect our kickoff to happen sometime in February, probably with the commission and other groups. We'll have department kickoffs. We'll have a number of kickoffs that'll happen. And then, we would want to move forward. But what I'd like to do is, of course, have Al and or Dan, who were both doing the interviews with me, to make whatever comments they might want in regards to the process or the firm.
I would say 2 things I'd like to say. One is in regard to the process. I think we all went through and the 3 of us went through individually and scored each of the proposals initially. And if I recall correctly, it was at that time even that Beckett and Rader kind of seemed to come to the top just from the way their proposal was constructed. And then we went through, I don't remember what the dates were. We had a couple of evenings where we interviewed
19th and 20th.
the 3 firms, and we each individually scored them based on the interview again, and Beckett and Rader came out unanimous between the 3 of us. They seem to have more energy, I guess, and some unique ways of looking at some things. One of the, we went through the interviews. I think they were the second one that we interviewed, if I remember correctly, and I actually got excited listening to them. Where the other 2 I think would have done a very good job as well, but it just seemed there was a real energy there. I guess Mr. Mansour, I know you took some more detailed notes. If there's some things that you'd like to comment on regarding.
So I'd echo the comments so far. So I thought each of the firms that we had when they made their presentation would have done a competent job for us. It seemed like they all had their strengths and weaknesses. Even the one that we chose, I think, had a very strong, I guess, kind of bent toward being creative, which was really, I think, interesting for us because that was the one that we felt was going to take us to the next level in terms of what we could get out of their thought process. The other ones, I think, again, would have done a competent job, but they didn't really, didn't seem to exhibit anything special to us in way of their thinking or in case of their energy. So that's, I think, where we ended up.
There was some initiative they seemed to take. They had done quite a bit of homework,
Yep.
prepared
Yep.
some information
Yep.
to us, looked at the township in a different way than maybe we have
Exactly.
traditionally. And they actually created some labels for different areas of
Yep.
the township.
And I think
found out that I live in a millennial area, so
so
that was news to me.
There you go. And
I'd like to see that map.
it's in
we
the
still have
conference room, I think. But anyway, the other thing is that I think that they offered a couple of unique ideas in terms of soliciting, obtaining public input. one of which is to work through the schools and kind of get survey and information out to the families in that regard. So I thought that was really good. The point that had me a bit concerned about it was, and we did probe them a couple of times on this, of how specific they were going to be about their implementation plan. And I think they had some general ideas, but I think it's going to be incumbent on Mark and the rest of us to really, once we get these ideas down, really spend some time and to figure out what timelines, responsibilities, et cetera, that we're going to need to work on in order to make the ultimate vision come around. Thank you.
Any questions from planning commission members based on what you've heard?
If I could?
Sure.
Just point out that what this body would need to do this
Make a
evening, would just be to get a motion, and it's just a recommendation to the township board.
Love to see that proposal, just out of sheer curiosity. It's something.
You're all welcome to see it.
Is it something you could email to everybody?
Potentially could. I'd like for the board to approve things first. I mean, that would be my preference. If you don't mind. I mean, I can check with David. I don't know where legally, but it seems like it would make sense.
The commission or the board?
The commission.
Yeah, well, and again, my recommendation, and I know that the township board talked about, and I'll have to defer to Mr. Mansur, but I think we've got some budgeted money for master plan.
Oh, yeah, we're all good.
Already, and we're all good to go. So I think this is a formality. Once you guys choose your consultant, I think it's just a formality, and
Yes.
maybe even superintendent's office can
But
process it.
Chairman Gelling, I think the question really was, is it okay for us to distribute the drafts of the material that
Oh,
we
no, I think
receive? I think it's public record.
Yes.
So we certainly, no reason we can't distribute that.
In fact, I was going to bring mine today, and I forgot to. It might even be in my car.
You want me to make a,
You need a motion?
We will. Were you going to say something else, Mr. Laddie, or no?
I'm done.
I want you guys to feel comfortable. We went through a process, and we were impressed, and hopefully everyone here will be excited as well. Once we get into the process. I think they had, their lead person is actually from Grand Blanc. It's going to be the project manager. She seemed to have a lot of energy and challenging us.
Looking forward to meeting you.
I think you're right. We'll all be challenged.
Compliments to the three of you for a good job you did. Interesting that
Time
you
will tell.
all thought about the same firm, which is good.
You need a motion to approve the selection then?
Yes.
Just the
Recommendation
firm.
of the township
Recommend the board.
Board, yeah.
I
The
would
Beck
make a
and Raider.
motion to recommend that.
Yep.
That Beck and Raider be recommended to the township board as being selected for our planning consultant for helping us to update the master plan.
Yes, that's it.
I'll support that motion.
Motion by Mr. Saab, support by Mr. Brown. Any other discussions? Not, a vote is in order. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 8-0. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Next item is the revised 2018 annual report. Mr. Lloyd?
All right, well, I do have some revisions. I think everybody has that. I see you have them. And then today, I hope everybody got these. I didn't send them out till today. I apologize, I didn't do them until yesterday. But these are I just pulled out and separated out for clarification as a result of a request from Mr. Mansur, the administrative approval. So I have put a table together that includes those. So I'll just hand that down. You've got that information listed. This is just a table to maybe make it a little easier. And it expanded the information in regards to all of those administrative approvals. So I guess I'll start out by saying, taking last year's report and essentially trying to just upgrade it and make it a little bit better. I'll do that every time. I'll always try to improve upon things. And I want to thank you for the help that I received in making this better, feedback and information. What I would want to do is, I think we've given it a quick review. I had some comments from the commission at the last meeting, and I believe I've been able to respond to that. In particular, there was concern about the manner in which things were displayed, if you will, on the map. And so what we've done is we've taken that map and modified that to reflect more of, and related the planning commission action with the site plan review committee action, because I think it was, pretty clear that there was not necessarily so many planning commission activities. You had 10 meetings, you had 4 applications come before you, both of which were double a site plan as well as a special land use. So, we've essentially utilized the data and mapped it in a way that is more illustrative of the activities, and it can show you that, we had a lot of stuff happening, up in the north end of town, which, I think what I understand from folks is that there's not a lot going on up there, but it appears from our activities that we've had some decent activities, amount of activity going on. We did have a number of administrative approvals, and that's a little different than what this body is used to, and I was asked to expand upon that and to also provide you, all of you, I sent that out as well, some information in regards to the authority for that. So I sent you excerpts from the zoning ordinance, as well as from the PUD agreement that affected, the Aldi site, for example, and both of them provide for mechanisms for administrative approval up to certain percentages of building size. And so as these projects have come through, for example, I'll use the O'Reillys as an example, if you remember. O'Reillys came in, wanted to build. They came back and they wanted to expand a couple of 100 feet, and they didn't want to be O'Reillys anymore. What they want to do is have a full retail building there. We don't regulate the use. All retail uses is allowed. So it was a simple site plan amendment. We added a couple of 100 square feet. There was no additional parking or any other modifications. And so we did that. They were running into problems with the county in regards to getting both a left and right turn out of there, and they were only able to get a right turn. So one of the conditions on the project from the commission was they would need to get approval from the county for that left turn. They were unable to get it, and therefore O'Reilly said, well, we don't want to be there, so they changed it to a basic retail facility. And if there's any questions on any of the other ones, I would be happy to respond to them. But
If I may, I was thinking, one of the problems we really had with that was the exterior of the building, if my memory serves me correctly.
well, they upgraded
It
that.
didn't meet our standards at all.
Yeah, all of that, well, they did eventually. If you remember, Mr. Johnson made a wonderful comment during the site plan review about whether or not what they were showing as the front of the building was in fact the back of the building. He said, I think I can quote him here, where he said, well, this looks good for the rear of the building. What is the front of the building going to look like? And it was at that time that O'Reilly's realized, that then the architect, they needed to make some changes. They brought back an amended plan that showed an upgrade to what they had originally proposed, and that was approved at the site plan review committee and recommended for approval to move on. I'm trying to think of what else. No, I think that probably wraps that up. That ends up being what happened. When they brought in their revised plan for the new building, we got rid of all of the metal. Everything is brick now. So we upgraded, which is part of the ordinance. It says if you're upgrading the material, as long as there's no decrease in the quality of the material and no decrease in landscaping, things of that nature. So we made sure that they upgraded their proposed project and did things in accordance with the ordinance. So those are the kinds of things that we were able to approve. Clearly, there were a few others, and I should point out that this didn't just happen. This was a well thought out undertaking on our part. I think even before I was hired, there was recognition and an interest in being able to approve things at the administrative level. So upon getting on board, I worked with Mr. Laddie and of course the superintendent, and we worked through these things. But as we got closer and inquiries came in, I got with Mr. Laddie to make sure that what I was reading in the ordinance and what the ordinance said and what was being requested was all appropriate and the right way to pursue things. And the goal is to just expedite and move people's projects through, and that's what and why we're doing that.
I think also on a fairly regular basis when we do I guess what I'll call a straightforward site plan review, quite often there might be one thing maybe that's missing. Hey, you need to submit your photometric lighting plan. So we'll make that a condition of approval that it is reviewed for conformance with the zoning ordinance by, administratively, that kind of thing, so.
And we've done a good number of those, that's for sure. Now, I do want to say that one thing that will occur differently, I will expand on the administrative approvals, I think that was a good idea. And the other thing that I will do associated with these administrative approvals is, instead of simply adding them to my monthly report or putting a quick blurb in, I will put a report together for the Planning Commission. I think that's sort of what I got from the request here, was more information. And what I'm also taking from that is on a more timely basis as well, just when it happens. Or while I get the application, I can convey that to the commission. But like I said, this was a kind of a first go-around. We were trying to find our way, and I think we did a great job. Folks were very appreciative of being able to help them get through this process, particularly, and I think sometimes just letting it be known that it's an administrative process. It helps just from a, sense of all the requirements and stuff. So there's a real appreciation for us being able to move these forward. And, these are all straightforward, all absolutely 100% in line with the zoning ordinance. I cannot approve anything that deviates from the ordinance, so that can never happen.
As Chairman Gelling, I guess, and I'm one of the folks, I guess, that kind of raised this question. And so I was just kind of trying to tack back and forth between some of our meetings. For instance, we had the Alcera folks in here getting the approval for the addition to the Subaru dealership. And that kind of came before us. We saw it, we spent time, et cetera. And then there's other items like, again, this administration number 18-006, the ASI edition, 3,000 square foot block building edition, that I don't think got the same level of review, but maybe it's just a degree of kind of how we
Well,
looked at that.
obviously, if there's a special land use, it's gotta come before the full planning commission.
Sure.
I don't remember if that was the reason,
Oh, for the,
but typically, if.
For which one?
must have been for the
Alcera.
Sarah, yeah.
Oh, absolutely, that was the only reason.
Okay.
Yep, they had, because they do the auto repair and auto sales, all require special.
I would say, we could have a year where you don't see anything at the planning commission level if it doesn't rise to that level. There's certain things, I think it's condominium projects that need to go to the full planning commission.
For sure.
Certain things like that automatically come here. Or if there's something that you're interested in, hey, I've heard this coming up, I think we'd like to see it at the full planning commission, feel free to make that request.
And I'll work at being timely in regards to getting the information out to you in advance of taking action.
And just one other thing, I think in our planning commission bylaws, we had, if I remember correctly, some square footage not requirements, but limitations, that if it was over, certain projects were over a certain number, certain types of projects were over a certain number of square feet, that planning commission, maybe it was the other way around. If it was under a certain number, that the site plan review committee could approve and didn't need to go to the full planning commission. Maybe we ought to revisit what that specifically says.
Well, I'll push that information back out to the whole commission. I'll do the research and let you know.
Mr. Bandersky?
Yeah, two things, Mark, if you would. First, could you provide us a copy of the colored chart that you showed here recently?
It was in
The,
the email.
no, on the area.
The map?
The map.
Oh, gosh, yeah, I'm sorry. I see you guys printed your own out, yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's very hard to read.
I can.
I
So-
don't have a color printer.
Appreciate that.
Sure.
Secondly, would you please date the sheets that you provide? Because, for example, the planning report, there's 2 copies out now. One previously
Oh,
and the latest one,
okay.
and neither one has a date on any pages. So how do we know when we get an updated
Very good, sure.
sheet? Okay? That would certainly help us to know which ones to throw away, which one's the latest.
Thank you for that. I'll be a little more diligent there.
Mr. Bell?
Thank you.
Mr. Yachik?
Is it safe to assume that all of these variances were approved from the ZBA? all the presentations or applications to the ZBA were approved?
Yes,
And is this a sum total of all the,
yes,
so everything that was submitted to the ZBA was approved?
yes.
Is that true?
No, it's not, no.
These are the,
There were some denials.
They weren't,
Well,
I'm trying to remember.
Everything on this list was approved. So
Yeah, I'm not referring to that list,
okay.
but we,
that's what I was.
they did not bat 1,000% at the ZBA. It was
Right.
more like 800.
But this list is all of the approved projects, and that's what I was referring to.
This does not include the denials.
Be,
But we can list that too.
it may be helpful to us in the future of amending the zoning ordinance if we also saw the denials so that we could see what all of the requests that are submitted. There seems to be quite a few submissions for variances, and maybe that points to maybe we need to amend some ordinances.
That's what that would sometimes lead to, so that's not a problem. We'll definitely put down approval or denial on all of them. We'll just write approved or denied. I think.
oh, listed someplace else. I mean, are they on our website or?
I don't think so. It's not, the only way you'd be able to do that would be to go back through our minutes. You know, you could do the research and figure that out, but it's not listed like this. But I should point out that I do plan on listing, you know, the administrative approvals, our annual report, as well as the monthly reports that I do that go out. I mean, those are gonna start being listed and available on our webpage, just to, you know, continue to be as transparent as we can.
I guess, Mr. Yancho, I have no problem with the denials being listed somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think we're probably gonna learn more from what they had to give a variance for that the zoning ordinance didn't allow. That's a good point.
Okay, I think that information might be helpful to applicants too, who are applying for a variance, to be able to look at, you know, what
The
the
history.
history is of similar type of requests and what the zoning board of
As long
appeals
as they
did.
don't use it against us, right?
Well, they always seem
Public
very
records.
adept at getting similar situations in their mind.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, the apple doesn't fall far.
Anything else on the annual report?
No, and then this would be forwarded on to the township board from the planning commission for just showing your activity for the year.
Anybody else have any other comments or questions for Mr. Lloyd? We need a recommendation to,
Yeah, it'd be good to take a motion to, you know, approve the report as, you know, if you will, and then forward it to the board. Let's just say, accept the report and forward it to the board.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Bandersky.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the planning township report as submitted by our planner, and make a recommendation, or submit it to the board for their information.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bandersky to accept the 2018 annual report and submit it to the township board for their information. And that was supported by Mr. Yancho. Any further discussion? Not, motion is in order. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 8-0. And I think, Mr. Lloyd, you're still up at bat
Goodness.
after 2 swings.
Oh,
We've got the work.
connected at all? I mean, fouled one off at least? Still got 2 strikes no matter what, it sounds like. Anyway, thank you. Moving on, what I've done here, and we've talked about this for a little while, and, you know, I think it might be gaining a little more traction, I'm hopeful, is to put together a work program for the Planning Commission. And in a lot of ways, if you take a look at it, it's really just giving us all the chance, the opportunity to identify those kinds of things that we've talked about and that are important to us, and try to create some priorities and get scheduled the things we want to work on, assign people to do them, and get moving. And so, you know, I'm a crew of 1, and you know, it's wonderful to have the assistance that I have already received, whether it's from Mr. Laddie or Maria or anyone else. I mean, it is really quite amazing, but there's some fundamental things that we miss, and this commission has been very active and a tremendously educated and capable group of people who, you know, from all that I've ever seen, has just done an amazing job with the planning activities. And so putting this work program together is really just, and the idea is to bring these activities, they're being done in-house now, we're not farming things out, and so having some assistance and guidance and direction from members of the Planning Commission is going to help me. And I have to say, and in particular in the case of Ms. Dolores Coulter, she is really doing a wonderful job helping me with the ordinance rewriting. I mean, that's it. We're just getting started on one, and we've, you know, we haven't quite figured out all the details of a complete process maybe for a next go-round, but the work is getting done and it's being done well. We kind of run into the holidays. We've backed off a little bit, but I think we'll get ready and get started again here. And then we've recently received some feedback from the Zoning Board of Appeals in regards to approvals that they've recently made where they'd like us to take a look at things like signage. And so we'll do that, and with Mr. Brown being on the Zoning Board of Appeals, it seemed appropriate for me to simply put his name there. I think I asked him first, but you know, it would just seem to me that that would be an appropriate approach to this. And with the master planning effort, we've gone through a lot of that so far, but we got a year ahead of us now. So that's my idea behind this, and it's really, this will benefit me. It'll give me the opportunity. It'll give me a tool to work with, and the intent is to make sure it's a tool that you guys would be able to use. And so if you're not seeing any benefit, let me know. I mean, I'm not married to it. I just want to create a tool that we can get comfortable with using and move our projects forward. You know, I'm no magician with it, but I've used a format like this for a while, and it seems to have worked for me in the past. And let me know what you think.
I'm presuming that you would use this as a tool. Some things may go off of here, some other things be added as we find them, I guess, useful.
Yes, that's exactly right. We would be moving them off, we would be documenting them, and I should point out that as I move forward with doing things like documenting activities, I will be doing so in a way that we utilize technology much more than we do today. Currently, we handwrite a lot of things down. We make notes about our projects, handwritten. We copy them and put them in a binder. But what I'd rather do is to utilize the software that we have and keep the information forever, document it properly, and then utilize the input of putting that data into a system and being able to literally push a button and get it to map out and tell us a little bit about it. So as I move forward and do the maps next year, I've already worked out these things with the GIS and IT department, we'll simply document the projects as we complete them, and once they're done and they're on that list at the end of the year, I won't have to spend 2 weeks recreating a new annual report. It'll be being done throughout the year. So, you know, this just another quick, you know, kind of a tweak to the way we're doing things, but hopefully that'll be helpful. So getting back to this, I'm really looking for feedback on whether or not this commission thinks that this is something that you want to utilize and try to move forward with.
Personally, I think it's an opportunity for people that have an interest in one of these areas to step forward, get a little more involved in that particular item. I mentioned to you before that we don't want any of this to become a burden to anyone, but it's an opportunity to volunteer and in-depth involvement, I guess.
Question or comment. You've listed, like, under future project list, so at least 13 or 14. It might be helpful to try to prioritize those. I mean, obviously, you know, that's a pretty ambitious list, and
Yeah.
I'm assuming there are some that you may think are a more immediate priority than others, and maybe we ought to try to make some decisions along those lines.
On the future projects? Is that what you're referring to primarily? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, what I've done there really, you guys, is I've looked at the history of a lot of the things that you guys have already talked about, and nothing ever it didn't get pushed over the goal line, let me put it that way. And so I'm just bringing them back up, and if you're interested in getting them back on track and moving them, we will. If not, we'll take them right off the list.
This is kind of the holding cell at the bottom.
That's what this is. It's a place to put projects that we think we might want to move forward on, and if we do,
we get, someone gets the energy, or something happens legally, whatever goes on out there, we may find a need to move some things around, and so they're there, they're placeholders.
Yeah, I guess my question, are there any right now that you see as, needing more immediate attention? I mean, are you getting a lot of, administrative requests or, complaints or comments from?
I think the ones that we're working on now are really, the sign issue just came up, and then the solar that we're working on.
Right.
Medical marijuana, I think we've really taken care of that, medical or recreational, so that can actually come off the list. Yeah, I'm not seeing that. What I do want to point out is that if you look at that future projects list, you'll see the MP after a number of them. A number of them are going to have provisions in that master plan. They're going to help address them. So they're really not important issues to move forward right now, but things to give consideration to, and I sure want to make sure that I address these issues with the master plan. So they're kind of placeholders for that in a way too.
I think this is a good idea that at least these items stay in front of our eyes each month. And
Yeah.
don't forget about them. That we consciously decide to get rid of them or add
Okay.
something else personally.
And I will be actively using that and making recommendations and trying to, make suggestions. I mean, I will be actively utilizing this and moving it forward and figuring out, how often will we take any kind of action except, the plan. As I put down at the bottom, you'll see it says adopted, and then if we amend it, I got a place for amending it. Right in line with what you're talking about, Vince, in regards to making sure we keep the dates right. So I'll do that.
Chairman Gelling, I have a question about the, the work plan. So in the short-range planning, there are priorities that are identified on the left-hand column. High, TBD, TBD moderate, et cetera. How were those designated?
Those were designated, at this time, these were designated simply by me, by looking at these and looking at the, basically the importance and whether or not they were sort of in the mill. And the sign ordinance just got in the mill very recently, so I put it right there. Solar was already in there. Actually, we had already been working on it, so I left it right there because we're already working on it. And then the other ones to be determined, administrative approvals, I'd be looking to get feedback and work with somebody on what we're doing for administrative
So if we
approvals.
see any of these items, we say, hey, this is a high priority, we'll label it that way, right? I mean, we'll
Yes.
work with you.
Yep, and then they can be moved up, down, modified, whatever. These were just samples of what I was doing, and these are all determinations that, I've made sort of initially to start, just to help, and this is the Planning Commission's work program, so your sense of these, it's able to be changed, however you choose you might like to. Now, other places I've been, we had full committees to work just on the work program, to set the priorities and do all that, and I'm not looking to create work for somebody else. I'm saying, I can manage that and bring these back to you guys if we decide to tweak them. And if this isn't working for us later, there's no harm. It's really just a piece of paper if we decide, it's not working, or if we need to change it. We may find there's another format or approach that you guys would prefer, and I'm fine. I just want to find a way, and this one's worked for me in the past, and I want to keep things out in front of you. I want you to keep me on task, and I am saying to you clearly, I hope, I need your assistance in some of these areas too. And those of you who are interested and want to, it's just truly beneficial for the community, I would say.
Bandersky?
Yeah. Mark, in terms of the short-range planning, what's your hope in terms of completing the assignments there, in terms of just getting names listed?
Well, as it stands, I've already got a couple of these
Yes.
going.
No,
And
I
so
know.
I don't need to add more. I don't have room, really, and that's the other thing that I'm trying to do, is manage that workload. I don't really have a lot of room to put more ordinances on there.
What I'm looking at is you got farm animals. Is that gonna stay there, or you're gonna drop it off?
Oh, it could come right off. If this commission says we're not dealing with farm animals, it's only there because I put it there. Matter of fact, I'll tell you the truth. Maria told me I had to put farm animals on there or else I was in trouble. So,
Well, the only, the only point I was trying to get to was, if those are short-range planning projects,
right.
we should get on them,
Well,
And you know, make sure that we have, if we agree with them, and I'll just use farm animals, yes or no, but if that's, stays on the list, we need to get some names on there and get going on it.
Well-
That's what short range,
You're right. And when we can put them in there, here's the short range. Thank you for going there and giving me your interpretation of this. The short range, these are the things that are only gonna take 3 or 4 months, 5 months to do, not a year. These other things are more long-term, you know, like the zoning ordinance, listing it as the zoning ordinance. You're gonna see specific items in the zoning ordinance down here. But the short term is gonna list that specific zoning ordinance and then identify the time frame. So that's the short term. So that's why there's a shorter term listed there.
but I then just repeat my comments.
And-
It's a short-term plan, we
Right.
need to get on it.
But when we complete these and we have room to put them on, we will move those short terms up,
Yes.
identify timeframes for them to get completed, and we'll identify those, and that'll be a short time period, term, that they'll get completed within. But if there's a different way of explaining that or putting it out there,
The,
happy to work with you.
the bottom line to my comments is kick the planning commission in the ass and get them going.
Well,
Well, I think,
Okay.
well, I think what you're saying, you've got a limitation from your
Yeah.
your
Yeah. No, I
availability
understand that.
too, so.
Another question, could it be advisable if one of these groups decides there's somebody out there in the world that would be good to consult with at no cost, to bring them into that little subgroup?
yeah, I don't think there'd be anything wrong with that.
Well, I just raised that as a
Yeah.
consideration that, you know, we could, if there's somebody that we thought could help us.
Right.
Well, I think we,
I kind of see this as a starting point, you guys. I don't see this as an end point. You know, this is the beginning of putting a program together so that we can begin the process of managing this collectively. And identifying those projects that we do have to do. And if they're not put in front of us, you know, maybe we're not paying as much attention or expressing as much interest. It's just an opportunity to make sure this stuff stays fresh and alive and that we're working on it. And, you know, I don't want to get too hung up and worried about the short range, long range. Short range planning is typically zoning activities. Long range planning is just typically master planning, if you want to define them. I use those terms maybe a little too loosely here.
Chairman, yeah, I just want to make another follow-up comment on the topic of farm animals. If Maria is suggesting it, that kind of implies to me that she's getting a lot of complaints
must be,
about.
right.
must be an issue, and I think that would be good for us to hear what the issues are.
We
so
do.
that we can
That
get-
would
Yep.
indicate that maybe we ought to take a look at that, and if there are other issues that she sees, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
it gets a lot of.
Yep.
I have an idea, I don't know if this is exactly what you had in mind, but how about if I volunteer Maria and I for the farm animal information? I know we're not part of the planning commission,
Well,
but I know that Maria has had to deal with a lot of calls, and I've had to deal with some municipal civil infractions. And there is, believe it or not, there's a fair amount of planning commission activity that has to be considered to really get our arms around that topic. And so if you're taking people signing up on lists, I will draft Maria and volunteer myself, and now whatever pace you want. If you want that on the front burner, that's fine. If you want it,
That's a classic example of bringing in outsiders from the commission to help.
well, I was half inspired and half scared by
well, that's good to hear.
No, I think that's good.
And this is going to need to evolve, you guys. You know, I hope you can, you know, have a little patience with this and, you know, let's give this a chance to evolve. But all of your feedback is important.
Nachos, you have something else?
Yes, I'm wondering if Mr. Laddie would accept my help on the farm animal committee as well. I have some
Great idea.
background.
Sure.
more the merrier.
Well, we have an entire code enforcement staff. that's
Mr.
gonna
Chairman.
get involved. So he's got a big team all of a sudden.
Mr. Bandersky, you had something to say?
Mark, one last comment. Have you gone back and looked at what we had identified as priorities in, through our other previous consultant? We went through a bunch and we identified long range and short range. Have you reviewed those as input possibly to your list?
I'm pretty sure that we've
Okay.
gone through that, and that's part of where this came from. I did get information from Maria kind of earlier on about all this. We'll double check.
All right, I just wanted to be sure, because we spent a lot of time talking about that, and working on the long range and short range.
Yeah, and that's a big part of why I want to
think
get
that was
it
part of
documented,
the-
just keep it.
If I remember correctly, that was part of the previous master plan. Wasn't as specific as what we hope this next one.
Double check that as well.
Okay, anything else on old business? Not, that takes us to new business. I had added an item identified as planning commission assignments. And, with Mr. Johnson giving his resignation, he had a couple of roles that he filled. One was, vice chair for the planning commission. And I guess I'd make a recommendation that, Mr. Brown fill that at least until we have our next,
Reorg.
I think, which is in July, when we would vote if Mr. Brown would accept that.
Sure.
I don't know if we need to take any action from the planning
I
commission.
think you do need a motion to recognize that.
Yes, I need a motion, so.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we have Mr. Ed Brown become the vice chairman of the planning commission until the
Our
time
next
for
election,
elections.
yeah. Okay, we have a
That
motion.
date certain is when? I'm trying to
It's in
remember.
July, I believe.
Is it? Okay.
Mr. Bandersky has made a motion.
Support.
Support by Mr. Yancho. Have 7 of us vote anyway, right? All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Another role that Mr. Johnson filled was on the Site Plan Review Committee. And I'd make a recommendation that our alternate Site Plan Committee member, Mr. Bandersky, fill that role through same time period as well.
I would support that.
So it's is that a motion by Mr. Brown?
is.
And a support by
Sorry.
Mr. Worsham. Other discussion? All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Next item would be committee reports. Mr.
Sir,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think it might be a good idea to go ahead and appoint an alternate this evening for the site plan review committee if you would like.
Yeah, is there anyone that's got interest in,
So for an alternate.
Yeah,
if
so
you
if,
think-
if we have it's usually good to have 3 different eyes there and, at the meeting, and sometimes there's an occasion where one of us can't make it, so. I'd like to make a motion for Mr. Yancho to be our alternate for Site Plan Review Committee.
I would make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Saab, support by Mr. Mansour. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Yancho. Move on to committee reports, Mr. Mansour.
I have nothing from the Township Board this month.
Anything else, Mr. Lloyd, from planning and zoning that we haven't talked about?
I think I would want to just reemphasize, and ask for the commission. I know it sometimes gets to be a little bit of a problem to deal with the computers and getting our information and things like, color copies of whatever. I mean, please get with us as soon as possible. And if a Monday before a meeting comes and you haven't received a packet, because we're going to try to send everything out electronically, always, as we've talked about for a while, and we're going to keep doing that. But if you haven't received anything by the Monday before the meeting, at least if you're going to wait that long, please call. Because our effort is always going to be to try to get it out on that Friday. And we've been able to button down our timing a little better this past year. So please and if anybody is struggling in any way with your computer or access, we have amazing IT people who can write out every detail of whatever it is you might need to do. Or for heaven's sake, you can come in here and use our computers, whatever might work. So the point is just, and if anybody's running into any problems, just let us know if you're having any technical issues, because that's what we're doing. And plans and projects and stuff are going to continue to come out that way. And, review of documents and stuff. So if you're struggling with that, or if it's a challenge or any of that, please just let us know. We're here to help with that, and we got good people to give you that help. So anytime something comes up, please.
Thank you. The one thing that I think that I do, maybe it's laziness or whatever, but I'll say, I got my packet, I don't go and look at it for right away, let's say that.
Very good.
And that's when you find out like, oh, we didn't have the minutes in there, I didn't,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
that's why it's a last minute thing sometimes.
I would just make a comment about meeting minutes for last month. The holidays kind of screwed that up in terms of Christmas and New Year's. I received the draft yesterday. I made revisions to it, and I have a note from Kathy, but obviously it wasn't distributed to the full commission. So
Makes sense. Yeah.
that was how we tripped up
People
on that one.
holiday. Well, I appreciate your diligence in following through on that. Mr. Brown, do you have anything zoning board of appeals?
We did. The zoning board of appeals met on December 18th, if my memory serves me correctly, for Ascension Genesis, and that was for their request for the additional signage on the front of the medical center. And it was approved by the zoning board of appeals based upon substantial justice. There was a minimum variance necessary, and so it was approved.
Question, my memory isn't always that good, but we had a discussion, I think you might have even mentioned it, Mr. Lloyd, about identifying, I don't know if it was properties within 300 feet of non-residential properties within. Is that the kind of thing that we're looking at to amend the ordinance?
No, if I might, the effort right now is to take a look at the corridor of the freeway from point A to point B to be determined, and look at establishing distance parameters, 200 feet, 400, 500, 1,000, et cetera, getting to, pretty considerable distance. And then looking at what the percentage of building coverage that we have already allowed, and look at whether or not there's a formula, what the formula would be if we just use what's already happened. And then take that and break it down into what's practical and what's appropriate, and see if it makes sense to utilize a formula to make determinations on the size of signs, at least along that freeway corridor. So that's what we're going to be looking at. It's a little bit of a unique review, and be a rather unique ordinance when the time comes. Let's see how that evolves. But Mr. Brown's involved, and of course, and just so you know, I should have pointed this out, Mr. Laddie and I have set up weekly meetings just to make sure that we're both staying on top of the issues that are coming our way, with the coordination necessary for all that's happening from an economic development standpoint, DDA, planning, zoning, the zoning board of appeals. I mean, it's really ramping up, and Mr. Laddie's a great asset, and he said he'd be willing to help, so here he is. It's great.
Anything else?
That's all I have. We just had the one case.
That outnumbered site plan review, we didn't have any.
We had 0.
So, next item on our agenda is a motion for adjournment.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
I'd make a
Bandersky.
motion that we adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Bandersky to adjourn, support by no one. Everyone wants to stay. Mr. Yancho. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
8:02 p.m.
Those opposed, motion passes 8-0. We are adjourned at 8:02 p.m. Thank you.
How long do we get?